Picture this. You walk out of a store holding a bag you didn't plan to buy, wearing a smile you didn't plan to wear, agreeing to a favor you definitely didn't plan to agree to. And on the drive home, a tiny voice in the back of your head goes, "Wait, how did that just happen?" Here's the thing. Most of the time, when someone influences you, you don't feel a shove. You feel a nudge so soft it barely registers. And by the time your brain catches up, you're already halfway down a road you didn't choose. So today we're pulling back the curtain on 8 quiet signs someone is steering you without you noticing. Some of these are used by marketers, some by charming coworkers, some by that one friend who somehow always picks the restaurant. Let's get into it. Number 8. They mirror you a little too perfectly. You sit down for coffee with someone new. You lean forward, they lean forward. You laugh, they laugh a beat later. You cross your arms, and 30 seconds later, so do they. It feels nice, warm, like this person just gets you. This is called the chameleon effect, and it's one of the oldest tricks in the influence playbook. Your brain uses subtle similarity as a shortcut for, this person is safe, this person is like me. Researchers Tanya Chartrand and John Barca at NYU ran a now-famous study where Confederates subtly mimicked participants' posture and gestures during a conversation. The mimicked participants later rated the interaction as smoother and reported liking the other person more, without ever noticing the copying. Salespeople are trained to do this. Dating coaches teach it. Skilled negotiators do it without thinking. Even that coworker who suddenly starts using your favorite phrase in meetings, that's the same script. Here's the part that should bother you. Mirroring feels like connection. But when it's engineered, it's not connection. It's a doorway. And once your guard drops, everything after that walks in easier. Number 7. They give you something small before they ask for anything. A stranger hands you a free sample. A coworker brings you coffee you didn't ask for. A brand sends you a little gift in the mail with your order. And suddenly, when they ask for something in return, saying no feels weirdly rude. This is the rule of reciprocity, and Robert Cialdini spent decades documenting how ruthless it is. In one classic study, waiters who gave diners a single mint with the check saw tips go up. Waiters who gave 2 mints and said, "For you, because you're such nice customers," saw tips jumped dramatically higher. The mint cost pennies. The influence was massive. Watch for it everywhere. Free trials that make canceling feel ungrateful. The friend who just happens to help you move right before asking a huge favor. The charity that mails you a dress labels you never requested. Here's the uncomfortable takeaway. Your brain treats even the tiniest gift as a debt. And people who understand that will hand you gifts you didn't ask for so they can collect on debts you didn't agree to. Number 6. They use your own words back on you. You mention offhand that you value being a loyal person. 20 minutes later, they're saying, "I know you're loyal, so I'm sure you'll back me up on this." You told your manager you're a team player. Now every extra task comes wrapped in the phrase, "I know how much you care about the team." This is called the consistency principle, and it's a quiet monster. Once you publicly claim an identity, your brain fights hard to keep acting like that identity, even when it costs you. Cialdini and colleagues showed this beautifully in studies where people who were asked to make a small commitment, like putting a tiny sign in their yard, later agreed to a much larger request, like a giant billboard, at rates far higher than strangers. Watch for the language. You're the kind of person who, "I know you always," that's not like you. Each of those is a soft handcuff clicking shut. Here's what should make you pause. The most effective influencers aren't fighting your values. They're using your values against you, and it works because deep down, you'd rather betray your own interests than betray your own self-image. Number 5. They create a sense of shrinking time. This offer ends tonight. There are only 3 seats left. I need an answer by tomorrow morning. Your palms get a little damp, your thoughts speed up, and somewhere in the rush, careful thinking quietly leaves the room. This is scarcity plus urgency, and your brain is astonishingly bad at defending against it. When something feels rare or time-limited, we assign it more value, and we make faster, sloppier decisions to grab it before it's gone. Studies on loss aversion by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky showed that losses feel roughly twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good. So the fear of missing out overpowers the pleasure of getting a good deal every single time. Look at how airlines display only 2 seats left at this price. Look at limited drops from sneaker brands. Look at the friend who suddenly says, "I need to know now or I'll ask someone else." Here's your slightly uncomfortable takeaway. When someone shrinks your time, they're not trying to help you. They're trying to shrink your thinking. Real opportunities usually survive a good night's sleep. Number 4, they frame the choice before you get to it. They don't ask, "Do you want to help?" They ask, "Do you want to help now or after lunch?" They don't ask, "Do you want the upgrade?" They ask, "Do you want the standard package or the premium one?" Notice what quietly disappeared: the option of no. This is called framing, and it's one of the most researched tools in behavioral psychology. Kahneman and Tversky showed again and again that the way a choice is presented shapes what we choose, even when the underlying options are logically identical. A menu that lists a $200 bottle of wine at the top makes the $60 bottle feel reasonable. A 3 payments of $29.99 price feels smaller than $89.97, even though it isn't. A survey question worded slightly differently gets wildly different answers. Here's the part that should bother you. You think you're making a choice. You're actually making a choice inside somebody else's cage. And the walls of that cage were built before you even sat down. Number 3, they use the crowd to move you. Everyone's doing it. This is our bestseller. 9 out of 10 dentists agree. Look, this post has 40,000 likes. You feel a subtle tug. If everyone else is picking this, it can't be a bad choice, right? This is social proof, and it's not a modern invention. Your brain evolved in small tribes where copying the group was usually a survival advantage. The problem is that instinct now runs on autopilot in a world engineered to hijack it. Solomon Asch's classic conformity experiments in the 1950s showed that people would openly agree with a group's wrong answer about the length of simple lines just to avoid standing out, not because they were confused, because the group's pressure was that strong. Now think about how modern platforms use this. View counts, follower counts, trending tabs. People who bought this also bought. Most popular, fake reviews, curated testimonials, the wisdom of the crowd weaponized. Here's the twist. The crowd isn't always wrong. But if someone keeps waving the crowd at you as their main argument, ask yourself why they're not showing you the actual reasons. Number 2, they borrow authority they haven't earned. A person in a lab coat tells you something, and you nod. A guy in a suit at a conference makes a claim, and it lands harder than the same claim from a stranger in a hoodie. You've been trained your whole life to trust signals of expertise. Titles, uniforms, jargon, confident tone. And most of the time, that's a reasonable shortcut. But it can be faked, and it often is. Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments in the 1960s are the extreme end of this story. Ordinary people delivered what they believed were dangerous shocks to a stranger, largely because a man in a lab coat calmly said, "Please continue." No threats, no weapons, just a costume of authority. Now watch how it shows up in daily life. Influencers who present themselves as experts with no credentials. Ads featuring actors playing doctors. Coworkers who bury weak arguments under piles of jargon. A confident tone standing in for actual evidence. Here's the uncomfortable question. When was the last time you agreed with someone because their reasoning was airtight versus because their voice was steady and their title sounded impressive? Number 1, they make you feel like the whole thing was your idea. This is the top of the list because it is, hands down, the most effective form of influence on Earth. You don't resist it because you don't see it. You defend it because it feels like you. They plant a seed early, a casual comment, a story, a joke, maybe a leading question like, "Have you ever thought about switching jobs?" Or, "Doesn't it seem like your roommate takes advantage of you?" Weeks later, you announce a decision as if you arrived at it on your own. You feel proud of the clarity. You have no memory of who first set the trail. Psychologists call versions of this priming and suggestion, and researchers like John Barg and Elizabeth Loftus have shown how astonishingly malleable our sense of my own idea really is. Loftus famously demonstrated that entire false memories can be planted through nothing more than repeated suggestion and leading questions. Watch for the pattern. Someone drops the same phrase around you 3 or 4 times. They ask questions shaped like conclusions. They tell you stories that just happen to model the choice they want you to make. And then they step back and let your ego take the wheel. Here's your slightly uncomfortable takeaway. The people who influence you most aren't the ones shouting at you. They're the ones whispering so softly and so early that by the time you speak, their voice sounds exactly like yours. So here's the thing. Influence isn't evil. Every good teacher, every honest friend, every decent partner influences you in some way. That's just being human around other humans. But some people are steering, not sharing. And once you can spot the moves, mirroring, gifts, your own words, urgency, framing, crowds, authority, and planted ideas, the spell gets a lot weaker. You don't have to become paranoid. You just have to become awake. If your brain has been quietly nodding, yep, that's happened to me through this whole video, you're going to like what's coming next. Tell me in the comments which of these 8 hit closest to home. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.